Hi and welcome to a new episode of the State of the Net podcast. I'm Paolo Valdemarin.
And I'm Ewan Semple.
And I'm back in the UK.
Hey! Or is it all? Oh dear.
No, I'm on day 4 of my 10 days house arrest period. And
I think they call it quarantine actually, Paolo.
Oh, sorry. And I'm getting a call every day from the UK government, and they repeat every day that the person who calls has been trained to maintain all the privacy issues, and that I should quarantine for 10 days. And they asked me if I had my test. I did. It was negative.
Now, you see, actually, if they were smart, they wouldn't need to call you. They could just snoop on where your phone is.
Yeah, but probably they don't have access to my phone location.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you mean this is what the blue van parked downstairs is all about?
What do you think GCHQ do with their time all day?
Oh, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they're listening to this right now.
Well, I'm on their lists already, I reckon.
But yeah, anyway, it's... I'm not sure it's good to be back, but I'm back. The traveling was actually pretty good. It was...
It's like the good old days when poor people didn't used to travel, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the flight was actually... I flew with BA from Venice for like 40-50 pounds. So the flight was cheap, but you have to buy a test before leaving, 2 tests once you arrive. There's an optional other test if you want to be released on parole on day 5th, which I didn't buy. But anyway, it was like £300 just of testing. Yeah, pretty steep. I mean, considering that if going the other way, when I went home to Italy, the testing in Italy was free. It was provided by the National Healthcare. So, yeah. Anyway, it's good to be back.
And you've had some excitement looking out your window.
Yes. Yesterday, so the street where I live, it's a dead-end street, but it's where it ends is very near the entrance of the deliveries of the local shopping center. So every once in a while, trucks go down the street and then they have to reverse to go back. And yesterday was this huge Marks & Spencer's lorry, and it took like half an hour. I was filming. For our dear listener, I was filming the sequence and sending the videos to Ewan.
Which I was enjoying enormously. Somebody else is suffering.
And so I got my show. I must say, it's a pretty good place to be stuck at home alone, because you can get everything delivered in this town at any point. So I'm getting deliveries all day long, and I can't leave my flat, but it's not a big deal.
It's really interesting how much that's just become the way we do things, isn't it? I mean, it's why Amazon's making money hand over fist, and people have just, in some cases, woken up to the fact that you can just get stuff delivered really quickly and really efficiently, and why bother going out? It's going to be tough for I noticed the local towns are giving free parking just to try and encourage people to go back. And I think, people enjoy other people enjoy wandering around shops, and I think they're thriving again. But it's just interesting again how the balance is changing a little bit.
Yeah, also stuff like ordering groceries, for example. I used to schlepped all the way to Waitrose, every couple of weekends just to buy a bunch of stuff.
You're so posh.
Well, because usually I go to Marks & Spencer, which is just downstairs, but...
But you're still posh.
But it's so convenient to do it online. I'm never going to go back there again. I mean,
it hasn't got better because we stopped it. We used to do it years ago and then stopped because they were always doing weird substitutions and ran out of weird things that you'd think, why on earth did you run out of that? I
mean, to be honest, I only did one order. They did a couple of substitutions which were not too bad. The problem I used to have was that everything I would get was had a best before date the day after which was annoying. And it's actually, this is one of the things I used to decide if I'm going to buy something or not, because being alone, I need to have something that lasts for a few days at least.
Yeah.
But this time everything was actually pretty good. So
cool. Maybe they're getting their act together again because it's more pressure and there's more people doing it. But
maybe I was just lucky. I mean, I did an order with Waitrose, which arrived the morning after I landed. I did another one with Ocado, which is supposed to arrive tomorrow. I mean, the websites. The Waitrose website is actually quite good. It's a nice experience, and it remembers everything that you bought, even if you went to the store. So pretty good.
So that's interesting, because I was hoping we could talk a bit about Facebook and tracking, and it's really interesting in that context, isn't it? Because we want services to be as frictionless as, well, I was going to say as possible, but that's the point. There's a limit. There's a limit to the price I'm certainly willing to pay to have that frictionlessness. And it's interesting just where Apple have introduced this new security level where they're not stopping you doing anything, but they pop up and say, this app. And just to be clear for the listeners, it's not within Facebook. It's not the app itself that's tracking it, but it's that app tracking you doing other things on other apps. And things like knowing where you are and other things you've looked at on the browser or whatever else. So it's quite nefarious. They're peering into all sorts of places. And, the argument is that makes it more likely that you'll be fed adverts for things that you're likely to want. And I suppose up to a point, people might want that. But, the cost is just so high in terms of just complete abandonment of privacy,
I think that in my mind, the main distinction here is how much aware you are of being tracked. So take the Waitrose example. The first time I went to the Waitrose website and I logged in, and I basically found there the list of products I had bought in person at the shop last time I was there. And I was a little bit surprised. I said, "Oh, right, so they're tracking this. They know everything. Of course, they know because
credit cards. That's what they're for.
No, well,
loyalty cards more than credit cards.
Exactly. I was swiping my loyalty. I was telling them, "Here, this is me. Keep track of me." So, I mean, I was a little surprised, but it's fine. When I'm swiping my loyalty card, I'm telling them who I am at the cash register. I'm expecting them to save my information. And I think that is useful because when I'm shopping online, it's actually useful to have a list of everything I bought before, because it's very likely that I'm going to buy things again. It's actually a good service.
Yeah.
The problem starts when you are getting advertising and you don't know why this is happening. The problem is when you're starting to give information to Facebook and you don't know that you're giving information to Facebook.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, Apple put in an alert that basically tells you, are you aware that this app is capturing data? Are you happy with it? It's just a way to let people make that decision. And
just to be clear again, it's not data within the Facebook app. It's the other apps that it's looking at. It's other functions on the phone that it's looking at.
It's basically tracking. It is fine for you for other organizations to track your behavior while you're using these apps. I mean, did you read? I think that Signal this week they tried to run that campaign with ads that basically were showing the profiling information about users.
Yep.
And Facebook's actually stopped it because they don't want it to be evident. It's not, if you want, you can go and see why you're seeing an ad based on Facebook profiling information. But I think that most of the time people just don't realize how much information they have about you.
Well, it's interesting as well because I last week we were talking about podcasts, and I was saying I'd sort of pulled back from listening to so many tech podcasts and how I'd unsubscribed from MacBreak Weekly for the first time in nearly 20 years. Well, I'm back. And I'm back partly because Leo Laporte, who runs Twit, has introduced subscription payments. Mm-hmm. And just as a vote of confidence and seeing how it goes, I decided to pay the £7 a month, or is it $7? Might be $7 for the whole of the Twit network, and that's like dozens of different podcasts. And it's because he has become uncomfortable, as many podcasters do, with the amount of tracking that advertisers ask them to do on their behalf. Mm-hmm. And the amount of data about listeners that they are increasingly being pressured to pass on to advertisers, and the advertisers won't work with them if they don't do it, sort of thing. And just in the context of these increasing issues and increased awareness about the issues, he's decided, and he always wanted to make it subscription, but in the early days not enough people were willing to pay. And of course now he's got enough, he's not stopping doing the advertised, paid for by advertising stuff. Mm-hmm. But I have to say, I'm enjoying listening to the podcast without the interruption of the ads.
It's interesting. This morning, I published an updated version of the Good Morning Italia app, which is a news service that I'm collaborating with. And because it was a new version of the iOS app, I actually went through the process of telling Apple all the information about tracking and what we track and what we don't track. And I realized that we track very, very little in the app. I mean, essentially, we're asking for an email address to create an account, and that's it. We're not tracking behavior. We're not tracking. I mean, this is a subscription-based news service. So you pay €3 a month and you get the news. That's it. And it's surprisingly nice to be able to have this kind of relationship with your customers, because yes, we are trying to observe what people enjoy more or less, because this is helpful to offer a better service. But very often we just ask up front, so do you like this or do you not? And I completely appreciate that is only capturing a small part of the interest and behavior of users, and that there's a whole bunch of users who will not answer questions that are still valuable users, and understanding better what they do is useful for the company. But not having to profile them and to basically try to steal information or to decode information, that's great. It just feels refreshing, and I think that more and more companies are going in that direction. And if you think about how many subscriptions you're paying these days, that's fine.
It's interesting, actually. I was listening to a podcast from the Omni Group, who make Omni Outliner and Omni Focus and whatever. And Ken Chase has been around in the industry a long time and a very staunch advocate for privacy and the issues behind it. And so he was involved in the podcast, but there was also a lady from the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who are a group of lawyers and activists who keep a track on the way the internet is developing and try to keep people's rights at the forefront. And she was making the point that actually, a lot of the data and the statistics doesn't make a huge amount of difference anyway. I can't remember the actual figures, but it's a bit like the old advert about was it the marketing guy commenting that I spend all this money on adverts and I know that it hits 30% of the customers, blah blah blah, but I just don't know if it's 30% or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was Henry Ford. Henry Ford used to say that. Yeah, I know that only 50% of advertising works, but I don't know which 50% works.
The point of this lady was making was it's not that much better nowadays, even with all of this. And it's interesting how, I'm sure I've ranted about this before, but with Amazon, going back to the delivery thing, I'd ordered a book that I ordered it on, what day are we today? Thursday. I'd ordered it on Tuesday and it said it would be delivered the next day, Wednesday, by 10 o'clock. And it wasn't. And the first thing was just how bothered I got by the fact that they hadn't managed to get it instantly to me, because I'm so used to it. And so the book arrived today. And so that sense of, increased expectations, I want it and I want it now. Even Amazon are sort of sometimes fall on that one. But the other thing I was going to mention was that I looked at the website and things we think you'll like. The top of the list was some depilatory cream for removing hair before you... Right, I'm thinking, the girls have been using my Amazon account again. And sometimes even without the intrusion of my daughters, there are days when the Amazon algorithm just goes completely weird, and you think, what on earth made you think that I would be interested in that? So it's flawed. It's fraught. Okay.
I mean, it's not perfect, but I think that it does work much better than advertising at the time of Henry Ford, in the sense that you do have a lot of feedback, and it is effective. Otherwise, all these companies wouldn't be there. I mean, Google and Facebook are good at finding customers, and I think that to some degree, this is a positive thing. I mean, this is much better than having advertising, put in front of your face at any point, whether you were interested or not. I mean, the fact that they are trying to push stuff that is potentially more interesting to you, of course it's not perfect, but it's better than random, which is what it was before.
So this is an extreme view, but, it is a truism that the whole advertising and marketing business is based on convincing you that you have a need, that something is lacking, there's something missing, which very easily spills into you're not good enough, you're not successful enough, blah, blah, blah. I wouldn't mind if nobody advertised to me at all, frankly.
I mean, look, if advertising was what you say, I would agree. I don't think that this is what advertising is. I mean, this is what advertising can be. But in its most basic form, advertising is trying to inform customers about the existence of a product,
which they need.
And I think that this is essentially a good thing, because you might not know that the product that you might want exists. And if there is a way for me to let you know that this product exists, this is not a bad thing. I work with a lot of companies, and these companies are using digital advertising, and they are doing it with different level of success, and they're not doing it because they're trying to convince people that they are insecure and thus they need to buy their product. They're doing it because they want to find the best potential customers for their product. And to be honest, Facebook works pretty well.
Yeah, no, I've heard that argument.
I mean, my brother is starting a new enterprise, and they are selling those protective plastic for iPhones and for phones, and to him, advertising on Instagram and Facebook is a great thing, because you can just find people who have a phone, who have that type of phone, and you can tell them, look, if you want to protect it so that when you drop it the screen doesn't crack, you can buy this product, which you might not know exists. There's nothing wrong with that. We're not trying to convince them they are poor, insecure fuckers, and that if they don't buy this protective thing, they're going to, their family will abandon them.
So does he avoid having any sort of prettier than average models using the product, or more ideal than average homes as the backdrop, or
we can't really afford any
but that's the point. I mean, it's a very, yes, okay, as somebody, well, we were just talking about me perhaps doing something that might involve exchange of monies, and my real discomfort with remotely getting involved in selling, marketing, anything remotely related to that, and I may end up not doing it because I can't attract anybody to the bloody thing in the first place. But it is such a slippery slope, because you then do start to massage the images and you were trying to get me to massage the messages, Paolo, and
I wasn't trying to get you to massage. I was look, when I started working in advertising 30 years ago, I was working with I had my own little studio, but I was mostly working with a larger agency in Trieste that has been around forever. And I was hanging out a lot with this guy. I think he was in his 60s, and I was like 18. And at the time, to me, that was, generation. What was like 2 generations between us, and the passion for advertising. And this was a little bit, the first generation of, at least in Italy, of modern advertising. Those that came out after the war, where very often the collaboration between industry and the advertising community created products, because you had brilliant people in the industry that had potential, that they were finding new materials, and it was this time where plastic was a good thing. And it's and on the other side you have these advertisers who were passionate about the product and the ideas, and they were all working together, and they created whole product lines. And it was naive as much. I mean, you look today at advertising from the 50s, and
you say naive in some ways.
Naive.
It's effectively straightforward, but
yeah. But it's already at the time there was some tentative manipulation in trying to make things look better than they are. But coming from having somehow inherited that background, I'm thinking, advertising can be a very honest thing. And I think that the more dishonest thing you can do is try to push product to people who don't want it. And, yes, sometimes this is what advertising is. But sometimes lowering the threshold and trying to get people to try something, or trying to get people interested about something, try to capture the attention of somebody long enough that we can deliver a message which doesn't need to be manipulative. It can just be, please listen to me for a second so that I can tell you what I'm trying to do and why I think that this can be useful for you. This is also advertising and marketing, and there is nothing wrong with it.
I hadn't heard, this is going to sound odd, but I hadn't heard you actually describe quite so bluntly that you had started in advertising. I didn't know. It explains a lot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and this is why episode 42 is going to be the last episode of the State of Net podcast. Oh, absolutely. When I was, just to give some background, because I'm sure at this point all 42 of our listeners are very interested.
Shows how good we are, Mark.
It's I grew up in a family that was in technology. My dad has one of the first distributors of third-party products for the Macintosh. So I grew up with computers at home, but I'd like to use computers. I didn't like to sell computers. So when the Macintosh came out, of course, I was in love with this thing immediately, and I immediately started to use it to do graphic stuff and design. And then at some point, I dropped out high school and I started my own little advertising studio. And soon after that, I started working with this agency, and actually, I had been hired by this agency to teach one of their girls how to use Quark Express.
Interesting.
And she didn't want to use Express because she was a PageMaker user.
Gosh, again, nostalgia.
And so she was resisting. But at the end, I did manage to convince her that Quark Express was better, and so she started using Express. And a few years later, I asked her out, and then sometime later we started a company together, and then at the end of 1992 we got married, and we still are.
That's amazing. Sure, I understand. What?
So yes, Siri got
jealous.
all. So yeah, I have a background in advertising, and I like history of advertising, and I'd like a good piece of advertising.
Well, it's interesting just you describing getting into it through that path of PageMaker and whatever, and Quark Express, and just the conversation the other day with somebody I know who was wanting to set up, as the language now has it, a microsite, and the other person that she was going to do this with had a background in air quotes professional communications. So, of course, this woman wanted to pay an agency and wanted to set up pay quite a lot of money to build a big thing. And this person I know was just saying, well, we'll throw it together ourselves. And that was just a completely alien concept to this lady. And again, I think it's so I get the idea that it's not wrong to talk publicly about you doing something that might be of use to other people. It's like everything else, isn't it? The professionalisation, the perils of professionalisation. Once it starts to become an end in itself and a thing, and then other people feel they can't do it themselves, it sort of spirals out of control and becomes something else.
But look, I mean, I can't say that these, advertising agencies in the 50s and the 60s were not professionals, and they were not delivering a service that people could not do by themselves. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they were trying to manipulate people. Or if they were, there wasn't any ill intention. So I think that, yes, advertising has a very bad reputation,
They were manipulating them kindly.
As much as we are manipulating each other as we are having this discussion and we're trying to convince each other.
That's just got the whole wrong image in my head, pal. I wish you hadn't said that. Yeah, well, it's okay. So,
I'm not going to convince you. Did you hear that big electronic store chain in Australia has withdrawn the AirTags?
Yeah, because of the batteries.
Yeah, because the children eat the batteries. But did you hear? It's 20 children per week end up in ER because they swallowed a battery.
It's called evolution.
I mean, there must be something wrong with these, parents.
It does seem an unrealistically large number, doesn't it?
I don't think. I think it's bullshit. I mean, I think that it's. Do we want to start about how bad journalism is?
Well, there's that as well. Don't start that. But I know. Don't start that.
Yeah, let's keep this for the next episode.
No, I'm going to do it anyway because it's that inclination to, for people's benefit, inflate, manipulate, promote certain truths over others. It's the same thing.
Absolutely. But at the same time, you wouldn't go out and say that all journalism is bad, right? Most of it is.
It's getting ever closer to that.
Yeah, it is. But there is some good journalism. So I think that the because we have tools of mass manipulation, if you want, and try to get this idea out of your mind, it's easy to abuse, and it's easy to have distorted results.
Well, and it's partly why journalism's gone so wrong, isn't it? Because there are business models up in the air, and they're so desperate for numbers, and the numbers are being required by their only source of income, mostly, which is advertising. It's the two together that's the problem.
I have this endless discussion with my wife where I say they're just idiots. And she says, they're trying to manipulate us. I mean, the reason why they put news this way, it's like clickbaiting and clicks. And I think, no, look, I've met these people. They're just idiots. And this never stops. And we had some friends for dinner who will remain unnamed a couple of weeks ago, and they are journalists and working in
Italy. So
big
it's narrowing
in
down
Italy,
all the time, Paolo.
working in big organization. They also co-founded a conference anyway.
Yeah.
And
Hi.
and and we asked him, so because we were mentioning a specific big title that came out on a prominent newspaper in Italy, which was just a fear-mongering type of title, and asking, was this manipulation or was it just some idiot? And the answer was, it was just some idiot. Because, and he knows who they are. Say, this is not somebody trying. It's just that that there are a whole number of reasons. Now, the question we should ask ourselves is, why are there idiots doing titles on prominent newspapers? And there are many reasons for that, because there is not they can't get good enough people, because there isn't enough money, because their business model is going down the drain, and because they are very conservative, and because all people can be replaced.
I see, but you're talking to somebody who worked for 21 years at the Beeb with many, 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 many journalists, significant numbers of whom weren't idiots, but their editors were.
But that's a
so the journalists would be trying.
It's a little bit of an exception.
Well, not much. I mean, the point I was going to make was that idiot is a contextual description, in the sense that, the BBC gets its knicker in a twist all the time about keeping the Conservatives happy or not. And, everybody think, if you're left wing, you think they're right wing, and if you're right wing, you think they're left wing. So there's a hierarchy. The BBC is always desperately trying to either be brave and tell the truth, or keep important people happy. And that all then ripples down. So some poor journalist who's trying really hard to do his job can't, because the whole thing's sort of screwed from the start. It's really, really complex and hard. And so idiot, like I say, is a
No, but look, I mean, the quality of journalism that you have from the BBC is uncomparable to what you have on the average Italian newspaper. Okay? And I mean, I know enough of both, and I've been user of both sides. It will have all the problems of the world, and it's very far from perfect, but it's quite good.
Yeah, but we're talking about the industry as a whole, and like I say, I know some frighteningly smart people like Matt Fry, who now presents on Channel 4. I think Channel 4 News is about the only one that's worth watching these days. And I used to work with Matt and Owen Bennett-Jones, just really, really smart people. Lindsay Hilsum. So I've got no illusion about what a good journalist can achieve. But I think as a whole, the industry is just in a mess, and the standards are falling. And nightly news I don't watch any of the BBC news programmes because I just can't. It's physical. I can't do it. And I think, newspapers are similarly confused as to what their role is, and chasing politicians or advertisers or whatever. I think, and it's partly the internet that's done this, but I think there are other cracks in the system beginning to show anyway. And I agree. I think having a good, trusted group of people to keep politicians hold them to account really matters. But I guess the point I was trying to make was that and one of the reasons the BBC has managed to maintain whatever standards they have is that they've been paid for by a separate funding. So in a sense, it's like Leo Laporte's subscription, except with the license fee, you don't have any choice. But it's not advertising supported.
They don't have the stress of trying to figure out how to get more readers next week.
So that's what I'm saying. It's the impact and nefarious influence of the mechanism that underpins advertising, which is creating lack and need at all costs.
But on the other,
including the truth.
But on the other hand, I mean, as long as advertising was the main source of income for publishing companies and for newspapers, and that happened for years and years and years until the recent revolutions. Everything was, it wasn't all right, but they had sustainable business models, and they weren't struggling as much as they are today. So what really happened was that, they went from an environment where advertisers were engaging with the news publishers, and there was this exchange. You get the attention of the people because you provide news, and I'll try to add some advertising so they might find my product, to a situation where Facebook or Google can have the attention of people without the need to provide news. And suddenly the news system find this competitor that can be very, very aggressive and arguably much more effective at advertising, and suddenly there is no sources of income for. Now, unfortunately, this creates this spiraling situation where they have less money, so they cut costs, and then their product is shit, and they have even less money, and they cut costs further, and they basically are just going down the drain.
So that sort of brings us full circle back to the start then, because the mechanism that appeared benign in informing us about products that we might find useful and getting better at that has become the same mechanism that feeds us the kind of truth that we want to hear, rather than any form of consensual or absolute truth.
And where was the absolute truth?
Well,
I thought
yeah.
there is no absolute
you know how
truth.
skeptical I am about that. But
Exactly.
you know,
So,
well, it's
are you longing for the good old time of absolute truth?
Yeah. But it's a bit like the share world, you know, the financial world, where the bots just fly around, and day trading has huge impacts on the financial worth of things. And this goes back to the algorithms, doesn't it? And you know, again, the lady on the EFF on the podcast was saying that, you know, the fact that the algorithms are based on a flawed societal model means you just exacerbate the flaws. And if you haven't got capable and empowered individuals having some kind of checks and balances on that, it's getting all depressed, Paolo.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe everything will be better when we will have better AI to provide check and balances. I mean, it's...
I do tend to think that,
do we trust which
who's
might
better?
or might not be
But
true?
who decides what's better, Paolo?
Well,
and on what criteria?
The AI overlords will decide.
So is that Wall-E, where we're all very comfortable and happy, but massive?
Yeah, totally.
Right.
I trust. I mean, I'm sure that the overlords will find this recording, and they will come and find us wherever we have been shut.
Well, you're already locked up, so.
Yeah, exactly. And on this note,
wasn't too depressing, was it? There's a glimmer of hope. When the aliens take over, we'll be all right.
I'm sure. Somebody said that when the aliens will come, they will only find cockroaches and Keith Richards. Thank you very much for listening.
See you next time.